This happened when I was a teenager many years ago. I was with my best friend, Tony, and we were at my house. My parents were gone someplace. I don't remember where. Tony and I'd been best friends for many years, and we're like brothers. We like to prank our friends a lot, and things like that. On this night that we were hanging out, Tony had the idea. Top rank, phone call, one of our friends. This was back before everybody had smartphones. Cell phones were around, but didn't have the capabilities that they do today, so we were going to call our friend Adam, and Tony had a whole joke that he was going to say to him. I don't remember exactly what it was, but it was probably really stupid. So we dialed Adam's number on one of the home phones at my house. It rang a few times, and then who we thought was Adam picked up. Tony started going into his joke and wasn't stopping after he had spoke for like a minute straight. The person on the other end spoke. It was a man, but not Adam. It sounded like an adult, and I think we were about 14. The guy was really mad. I didn't recall exactly what he said, but he was asking us who was calling and what was wrong with us and things like that. When we realized that it wasn't Adam, we were both surprised and also embarrassed. Tony just hung up the phone when the guy was still talking. Then we had a good laugh about it, but we decided not to call Adam anymore. That was enough prank phone calls for us. Instead, we decided to play video games. Just moments after hanging up, though, the phone started ringing. We did not have caller ID, so I answered it, not knowing who was calling us, although I think we both had feeling that it might be the guy who we had just accidentally dialed. I picked up the phone and answered. I heard the same guy speaking, and he still sounded angry. I hung up on him, and then he called again, right after this time. Though we did not answer the phone, we started playing video games at that point, and over the next 30 minutes or so, the guy called back several more times at least. We assumed that it was him, but each time we didn't answer and just let it ring. Then, finally, we didn't get any more calls. We continued to game until probably about an hour after the call. That's when there was a knock at the front door. I was confused when I heard. I lived in a pretty typical neighborhood, but knocks on the door at night were very unusual. We were in my bedroom, and I left the room and walked out into the living room. I got over to the front door and looked out of the window. Some guy was standing there who I didn't know. He looked right at me, as I was looking at him. I moved away from the door, and he knocked again. I went back to my room and told Tony that some guy was there. Then the phone rang again. We were both wondering if there was any possibility that it could be the same guy, so we answered the phone call. This time the man spoke, and he told us to come outside. When I heard that, instantly hung up the phone again. Now, the man must have been calling from his cell phone. He knocked on the door again, and we both went out into the living room. We heard him yell for us to come. Outside, the guy appeared to be in his 50s maybe, and was wearing a baseball cap and a jacket. That's all I remember about him. We didn't answer the door, though. He stayed there for several more minutes before finally leaving. After that, Tony and I were just waiting for the phone to ring again, or for the guy to come back. But thankfully he never did. After that, we never pranked a phone call to anybody else. I think the guy that we called must have had caller ID, could have looked up our address by finding it in the phone book, or something. I really don't know. But that's my best guess. It still creeps me out that he actually showed up at my house. Several years ago, I was the victim of a wrong number. Call my cell phone rang at about 9 p.m. At night, I was at home, and by myself I lived with a roommate in a 2-bedroom house in a suburb of a major city. When I looked at my phone, it had a number, but I didn't recognize it. I decided that I would answer anyways. I was kind of curious as to who was calling me. Spam calls generally don't take place at night. There was a slim chance it was somebody that I knew. When I accepted the call, I put the phone to my ear and asked who it was that was calling at first. Nobody said anything on the other end of the line. There was just silence. I repeated myself after that. There was a few more seconds of silence. I was just about to hang up on them when somebody finally spoke. I could hear that it was a man's voice, but it sounded kind of raspy, almost as if they were trying to disguise their voice. They said, "Is this Jake?" I said no, and I thought they had the wrong number. The person responded saying no. Then they asked, "Who is this?" I didn't get my name, but I said once more that I didn't know anybody named Jake, and they should dial the number again. The person didn't respond, but I heard them. Breathing heavily, I then hung up on them. This call was pretty creepy in itself, but it doesn't end there. The very next night, at an even later time of about 11 p.m., I got a call once more from a random number I picked up, and after I said hi, whoever was on the other end hung up on me, only to call back about 10 minutes later. When they called back, they once again hung up, only about 5 seconds after I answered the phone. I decided to text the number and ask who it was because they kept calling me. They didn't respond to my text, though the next night once more, I was called at an odd hour of the night. It was starting to annoy me now, and I didn't answer it. I blocked the number instead, but now a different number called me, about an hour after I blocked the other one. It was really late now. I answered, but there is no talking on the other end. It was silenced for a good 10 seconds before whoever was on the other end hung up. I decided to block this number too. After I blocked it, I thought that was the end. And for a while, it was a few days went by, and I didn't receive a single call from somebody that I didn't know. But one night, probably 4 nights after the last phone call, I heard a noise outside. I ignored it. At first, because it was just the sound of a car driving by. When I glanced to the window, casually, I noticed a car going really slow, pulled right in front of my house, and then just parked on the side of the road. This was very unusual and hadn't happened before. My roommate was gone at the moment. I walked over to the window and looked. It was a typical looking car, and it was night. So I didn't get a make or model. All I know is that it was just sitting in front of my house at nearly midnight. I opened up my front door to get a better view. When I did, the car suddenly pulled away now. To that point, I didn't suspect the car and the phone calls to be linked, but about an hour later, just as I was about to go to bed, the car returned. It pulled in once more to the exact same spot it parked right in front of my house with the engine still running. I watched it out the window for a good 20 minutes. Nobody got out and the car did not turn off. It just kept sitting there. I didn't want to go to bed with the car parked there like that. I also didn't think I could call the police for a car just parked on the street. I walked over and opened my front door again, looking back. I don't know what I was going to do. I certainly did not want to approach them. But when I opened up the front door, the car sped away again. Some time went by and I didn't see the car again. so I went to sleep. After that night, I never noticed the car parking in front of my house after that, and I never got another call either. I still think it was the same person, but what they were doing, I don't know. I never thought a wrong number could change my life, but it did. I was just an ordinary guy, working a typical 9-to-5 job. Nothing particularly interesting ever happened to me. My life was predictable until that night. It was a Friday evening, and I was just wrapping up a long day at work. I barely had the energy to make dinner, but I forced myself to put something together. As I sat at my kitchen table eating, I mindlessly scrolled through my phone, checking messages, emails, and social media. My phone buzzed in my hand, and I saw an unknown number flashing on the screen. I hesitated for a moment, unsure whether to answer. It wasn't uncommon for me to get calls from unknown numbers, salespeople, political campaigns, sometimes wrong numbers. I had learned to just ignore them, but for some reason I didn't. Maybe it was out of boredom or curiosity, but I decided to answer. "Hello?" I said, chewing a bit of food. There was a long silence on the other end, like the person on the other side wasn't sure if they should speak. Then, a voice came through. It was soft, almost as if the person were whispering, and something about it made me uneasy right away. It wasn't the voice of someone I knew, nor was it a typical wrong number kind of voice. "Is this the man who was at the gas station last night?" the voice asked. The question made no sense. I hadn't been to any gas station the night before, or any time recently, for that matter. In fact, I hadn't left my house all day except for a quick trip to the corner store in the afternoon. "No, I think you've got the wrong number," I said, trying to sound casual. I didn't go to any gas station last night, but the voice didn't seem to care. It just repeated itself, this time with a strange edge to it. "I saw you there. I saw you watch me." I felt the blood drain from my face, my stomach twisted in confusion, and a growing sense of dread. What was this person talking about? I'd never been to a gas station the night before. Hell, I barely even drove much in the evenings. My usual routine was staying home and relaxing after work, especially on a Friday night. But before I could say anything else, the voice continued. "You watched me from your car. I know what you saw." My mind raced as I tried to piece together what was happening. I had to be missing something. Was this some kind of prank? A wrong number, sure, but this felt different. My instincts told me something was off, but I couldn't pinpoint exactly why. "I'm sorry, I don't know what you're talking about," I said, my voice shaking now. I set my fork down and stood up, starting to pace around the room. "You've got the wrong person. I wasn't at any gas station last night." The voice on the other end didn't respond immediately. Instead, there was just a long pause. It was as if the person was listening to me, trying to decide what to say next. "You were there. I saw you watch me. You followed me when I left," the voice said again, this time with more force. The word sent a shiver down my spine, and I froze in place. Something wasn't right. The tone of their voice had changed, becoming more unsettling, almost as if they were taunting me. I didn't know what to say anymore. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest as I stood there, frozen. My mind raced with questions. Who was this? Why were they calling me? What did they mean by following them? "I really think you've got the wrong person," I stammered. "I don't know who you're talking about. I wasn't following anyone." But the voice didn't let up. Instead, it spoke more urgently now, its whispery tone filled with strange intensity. "You don't remember, do you? It's okay. You will." My pulse quickened, and I felt the room close in around me. I suddenly felt like I was being watched. I glanced around nervously, as if expecting someone to be standing in the corner of my kitchen, hidden in the shadows. But there was nothing there. The voice continued, this time in a voice that was almost pleading, desperate. "I know you saw me. I know you did. I saw you watch me leave the gas station, but I couldn't get your attention. I tried to make you look at me, but you wouldn't help me." The words made no sense. My head spun. The more I tried to rationalize it, the more I felt like I was losing touch with reality. I wasn't making any sense of it. And the more this person spoke, the more unnerved I became. "I didn't see anyone," I replied weakly. "I didn't see you." Another pause on the line, and I thought the call had ended. But then, just as I was about to hang up, I heard the whisper again. Only this time, it was much clearer, much more distinct. "I'm in your house." My blood ran cold. I turned around and rushed to the front door, but I was too late. It was already ajar. Hung up the phone, my hand shaking as I pressed it to my ear. I stared at the door, paralyzed. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. The voice, it hadn't just been a prank. Whoever had called me, they knew where I was. How was that possible? How could they know my house? I grabbed my phone again, but my hands were trembling so badly I could barely dial. I called the police, my voice cracking as I explained the situation. They told me to stay where I was, not to leave, and that they'd send someone over immediately. As I waited for the authorities to arrive, I tried to lock all the doors and windows, but I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching me. My mind kept racing, replaying the conversation over and over, each word making less sense and more terror building inside me. The minutes dragged on, feeling like hours. When the police finally arrived, I rushed to the door, desperate to explain everything. But when they looked around, they found no signs of forced entry, no signs that anyone had been inside the house. "There's no one here, sir," the officer said, his voice calm, but there was a hint of confusion in his tone. "You're sure about this?" I nodded, feeling the cold sweat trickle down my back. "I heard the voice," I told him. "I know someone was here. They said they were in my house." The officer didn't seem convinced, but he agreed to take a report. As I sat on the couch, trying to make sense of everything, my phone rang again. It was from the same unknown number. My heart skipped a beat as I stared at the screen. I answered it, this time feeling a surge of panic. "Hello?" I said, my voice shaky. There was a long pause. I almost thought it might be another prank, but then the voice came through again. "You can't escape me. I know where you are." I froze, unable to speak, unable to move. Then the line went dead. The police left, telling me to stay alert and report anything strange. But I couldn't stop thinking about that voice, about the words they'd said, and about the feeling of being watched. I never saw anyone that night. There were no signs of a break-in, no footprints or fingerprints, nothing that indicated anyone had been inside. But I couldn't shake the sensation that whoever had called me was still out there, watching, waiting. I never got another call from that number, but the feeling of being watched never left me. And to this day, I still wonder if the person who called that night was ever really gone. So, to anyone reading this, if you ever get a call from a wrong number, don't just hang up. Because sometimes those calls aren't just random. Sometimes they're a warning.